Hi, I'm Linus from Performance Bicycle, and today we're looking at Shimano's new XT M8000 mountain bike group. And the XT group's been a benchmark in terms of mountain bike components for a very, very long time. And with the new M8000 group, Shimano has really made a lot of thoughtful updates and upgrades that are really focused around what they call their rider-tuned concept. So as we talk about the different components, one of the things we'll be talking about is how the small tweaks here and there really improve the rider experience and make this one of the best mountain bike groups money can buy. So first off, we'll look at the rear derailleur. So the first update that Shimano made with the new group is that they slightly changed the angle the parallelogram moves on, and this gives it a more horizontal motion. So any vertical motion in the bike going over bumps or rough sections doesn't jar the derailleur quite as much. So that improves the chain stability and chain retention. But it also allows them to make a slightly lighter lever feel. So what you'll notice with the new group is that the actual force required at the shift lever is a lot lighter. So that helps reduce hand fatigue and it just makes your bike more enjoyable to ride. It's going to use a direct mount style derailleur with the additional piece here that allows you to use a regular derailleur hanger. So if your bike is just kind of a standard rear dropout, you'll be able to attach it. If it does have a direct mount, you'll be able to use that too. It's going to use the Shadow Plus clutch mechanism, which is fantastic. That basically makes it harder for the cage to move in one direction. That greatly improves chain retention, especially if you're using a 1x drivetrain. This is a fantastic derailleur for that. It is offered in 2 cage lengths. This is the GS version. There's also an SGS longer cage version. So this derailleur will accommodate a 1x, 2x, or 3x drivetrain, and it is 11 speed. So it's going to have a max tooth capacity of 42, which is fantastic. So next up is the front derailleur, and this probably has one of the most radical changes over last year's design in the way that the derailleur is actuated. In prior years, and typically, front derailleurs had a parallelogram mechanism that kind of moved in this direction, and what Shimano realized is that they could stiffen up the whole component, make it a lot more responsive and accurate in shifting if they changed the parallelogram to shift in this direction. So you still get the horizontal movement, but it's accomplished by the derailleur moving, it's a pretty stiff spring here, but by moving what they call their side swing technology. So that moves in that direction. What that does mean is that the cable feeds in through the front of the derailleur rather than from the bottom or the top. So that does require a slightly different frame fitting, but if your bicycle wasn't designed for that, it's really easy to run the front derailleur housing along your brake line and into the derailleur, so it still looks pretty clean and works very, very well. Another great feature of this design is that the overall length of the cage of the front derailleur is much shorter than it was. And what that accomplishes is it allows you to use, it allows your bike, if you have a full suspension bike with very short chain stays, it opens up using a front derailleur on a lot of those designs without having tire interference, which is a big problem with some of the more modern suspension designs out there. So this is a really thought through component, works incredibly well, and accomplishes the goal of a stiff and accurate front shifting on a lot of different suspension platforms. So next up is the shifter pod. It's going to be similar to last year's design with a few noteworthy changes. The first and my favorite is that they've really slimmed down this clamp area. I like to have a really clean cockpit setup, so having this a little bit slimmer just looks a lot nicer on the bike. It's what you spend time looking down at while you're riding, so having that look nice is great. It's still going to have a thumb actuated paddle here with a trigger, but can also be used as a thumb paddle. So dual position there, which is great depending on how you like to use your shifter. It does have a gear indicator, which are removable. Again, if you don't need them, you can take them off and that covers up. And it's going to fit in and work in concert with the derailleurs to use a much lighter overall lever feel. So again, as you're riding on long rides, a lot less hand fatigue from having to shift gears, which just means more enjoyment and time on the bike. So now looking at the XT M8000 Crankset, the first thing that's noticeable, of course, is that it's going to use the new 4-bolt pattern that's borrowed from the M9000 XTR group. This bolt placement allows just an overall lighter weight and stiffer design, and also the way in which the crankset mates to the chain rings is a little bit better and accommodates a thicker, large chain ring, which greatly improves front derailleur shifting. As we look at the chain rings individually, you can see that there is a pretty big space between these two rings with a pronounced ramp on the inside surface of that large chain ring. And that's going to do a great job of picking up the chain and creating just a really fast, accurate shift. Another less obvious thing is that they've tweaked the ratios between the small and large chain rings if you're running a double. And the overall distance between the two chain rings has decreased. Typically, and this is just like the M9000 XTR group, there's going to be a 10-tooth jump between large and small chain ring. They did a lot of research in terms of how people actually ride their mountain bike, and found that having that smaller jump creates less disruption in your overall pedaling cadence and accomplishes the goal of having a wide gear range, but you still get that really fast, accurate shift without a huge disruption in your cadence. And especially mountain biking, say like on a climb and you need to shift, a disruption in your cadence mid-climb, especially if it's technical, can really throw off your whole rhythm. So having these gear clusters be a little bit tighter, or these gear ratios be a little bit tighter, just again improves the riding experience and gets you thinking about your gear less and riding more, which is fantastic. So next up, we're going to look at the M8000 Cassette. This is an 11-speed cassette. It's offered in two sizes, an 11 by 40 and also an 11 by 42. It's going to offer, similarly to the chain rings, it's going to have a really thought through gear interval, meaning that there aren't going to be any significant jumps from gear to gear. They really thought through the individual tooth counts to have as fluid progression in your gear ratios, and that's really going to create a smooth riding experience, avoid any big disruptions in your cadence, just like they were doing with the chain rings. Another great feature is that the larger cogs are all set on alloy carriers. So this helps reduce the overall weight of the cassette. It stiffens up the cassette so there's less flex during shifting, but it's also going to avoid notching a free hub body. If you have an alloy free hub body, having these long splines on the carrier just disperses the load over a wider area so you don't end up with any notching. The next three cogs also run on a carrier, and at that point then you switch back to the individually used cogs. Another great feature about this, and probably one of the best things about it, is that it fits on a standard 10-speed free hub body. So this is an off-the-shelf upgrade to 11-speed with a few of the other drivetrain components that don't require any major changes to your existing wheel set. So lastly, looking at the brake set, it kind of goes without saying that Shimano XT brakes have been the gold standard for some time now. And with the M8000 group, they've taken all of the things that made those brakes fantastic, carried them forward, and then made a few kind of thoughtful upgrades and tweaks along the way. So starting with the caliper, it's going to use a two-piece alloy design, but inside of there is a ceramic piston, and that just helps insulate the brake fluid from the high temperatures that are associated with the friction in the pads. So that helps just keep the brakes working for a long time regardless of how long your ride is. Just keeps the temperature down and the brakes consistent, which is great. The brake pads themselves are finned like a radiator, so that helps dissipate heat, especially when they're used in concert with Shimano's IceTech rotors. Just keeps the overall temperature in the brakes down, and that keeps the brakes working consistently regardless of how long your ride is. The whole system is going to use mineral oil, so it's much more environmentally friendly than, say, something like brake fluid or a dot fluid, which is fantastic. And then looking at the lever, it's going to retain the independent reach adjustment and bite point adjustment. So that means you can dial in the exact position of the lever to get it exactly where you want, and then also dial in the exact point at which the pads contact the rotor, so you can dial in the feel of the brakes, which is fantastic. One change over the last year is instead of having a plastic cover on the front, it's all just now metal, one piece, which is kind of nice. Much cleaner design, as well as less parts, less things to accumulate grit or corrode, which is fantastic. They've also slimmed down the lever and provided a way that it can integrate with a shifter or other cockpit components. So again, overall just cleaning up that cockpit area and giving it a really clean look. So altogether, the system is going to work as great as they have been, if not better, and be a fantastic value all around. So altogether, the new XT Group is going to update Shimano's XT Group into 11-speed, offer a lot of different drivetrain configurations, whether you want to run 11 by 40 or 11 by 42 with the 1 by, 2 by, or 3 by drivetrain. All of the components have been redesigned with the idea of really focusing on the rider experience. So you'll see tighter gear ratios for less disruption in your pedaling cadence, a lighter shifter feel as you're actuating the derailleurs to reduce hand fatigue and keep you enjoying your bike ride that much longer, as well as some of the most consistent and powerful brakes that money can buy right now. So overall, focused on making your ride better, it's the new Shimano XT M8000 Group, and it's available at Performance Bicycle.